Fear and stress. Dale Carnegie once said, if you want to conquer fear, don't sit at home and think about it. Go out and get busy. Julian McBain here, and this is my 14th Saturday vlog. So, just quick what I'm doing on the foreground here. Of course, I have my hunting on Manjaro Plateau. I'm still hunting curbs. I'm almost done the bronze challenge. I'm really kind of hoping this is the last one. What the hell? Oh, they haven't rendered yet. That's right. I had to log out and log back in because anytime you mess with the audio in Entropia Universe, you have to log out and log back in. But right now, before we get into things, pause the video and hit the subscribe button, please. I really appreciate all the support. So hit that subscribe button. That way you always know when I'm posting something, and you always have that immediate contact with the content I create. Thank you. So fear. Fear is probably one of the most important emotions that we as humans experience. It is both a safety net and our biggest inhibition. You know, obviously it likely evolved as part of the survival instinct where, you know, you're afraid of a predator because obviously the predator can maul and eat you, and you know, you're afraid of going too close to a cliff because if you fall over the cliff, well, we are fragile, and while the fall won't kill you, the short sudden stop at the end most definitely is likely to, depending on the height of the cliff, of course. And back when we were hunter-gatherers, a broken bone was pretty much a death sentence because they didn't know how to set bones. Or at least not, I have not heard of any evidence that they did. Maybe they did. At some point, they had to figure it out. But even if they did know how to set it, the healing process would have been extremely painful and difficult, especially since there was a point where we didn't even have a way to splint it. Right? So, as humans, because anything we didn't know about could possibly kill us, we developed this fear instinct. And this fear instinct really made it so that anything time we have something new, we suffer from stress. And you can call it fear, you can call it anxiety, but you suffer from stress. So like today I had a very important meeting with someone I'd never met, and the whole time I was fighting that fear instinct, that anxiety. It was almost like a physical pressure on the head, like there's a fog. And I think the only reason I got through it is because I knew what I needed to know cold. Like I didn't even need to think about it, and that helps. And so, and even though I probably talked a little too much during the meeting, that's okay. Because sometimes that's going to happen. We all have different ways of handling stress. We all have different ways of handling fear and anxiety. That just happens to be one of my coping mechanisms. So, because we have difficulty dealing with the unknown, I'm pretty sure that as a function of being successful, we are biologically programmed to work within a routine. And when that routine is broken, we suffer from the same stress, that same anxiety. Are we going to do what, finish what we set out to do today? And so when you do have to deal with things that are out of the routine, it's important to kind of take half a step back if possible, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes shit just happens and you're in the suck and you don't have a choice. It happened like that when I was in emergency services. I spent a few years. I did 3 years in search and rescue, and I was a firefighter for almost 2. So, well, no, I was on the fire department for almost 2. I was a firefighter for 1. Let me lay that out accurately. So, you know, in situations like that, you're always out of the ordinary. But even then, at some point, the non-routine becomes a routine. You're used to that heightened level of stress. And this is also why emergency workers, who not only suffer from that heightened level of stress on a consistent basis, but they also suffer from very consistent trauma from the things they experience out in the field. And I think one of the things that, you know, we all need to remember is that the people who do that job, and if there are any emergency services personnel, any military personnel on, I'm hoping that you're nodding your head. Maybe I have it wrong. If I have it wrong, drop a comment. But we have to, you know, understand that they have seen things that we will never see, or hopefully we will never see. And despite the fact that, you know, we may have a few traumatic events happen to us, they are constantly putting themselves in a position to be traumatized mentally and emotionally. You know, so there was a point earlier in my vlog series where I said that I think that, you know, I respect one of my favorite authors is Jordan Peterson, and he says life is a tragedy, and I said I disagree. But I do think life is a series of traumas. And for the emergency services personnel, unlike a regular person where the series of traumas is broken up by lengthy periods of non-traumatic events that allow us to cope with what's going on, for the emergency services person, it can be daily, especially if you're in a big city. I can't imagine the number of ambulance calls that a larger city gets in a single day. It's probably enormous. But all of that stress isn't because there's no fear. It's because those people have learned to overcome the fear of that trauma. And for those of us who are in less stress-inducing professions, we have to remember that fear, in a lot of cases, is nothing but an obstacle. There are times we should feel fear. I mean, if you're running full tilt toward a cliff and you don't feel afraid, there's something wrong with you. But at the same time, if you're fearful whenever you interact with, say, a client or something of that nature at whatever job you do, you know, whether you work in convenience or you work in, you're an attorney or anything like that, then you need to get used to overcoming that fear. Because especially one of the things when I was early on, I had a fear of angry customers. This goes back to when I was a grocer. I would have a fear of angry customers, not only because they could report me, but because when you're in the C-store industry, the convenience industry, the demographic of customers you get, especially on like Friday and Saturday nights, a lot of them tend to be working class, especially in the towns I was working in. By 8, 9, 10 o'clock, they're drunk, and a lot of being working class, there's a pecking order to the working class. You know, when are you willing to throw down? And before I took up fighting as a sport, because there was a time when I did not fight as a sport, now I actually find it rather fun. Walk off the field with big bruises. I was very fearful of fighting, and in fact, that's why I took up fighting as a sport, because I was so afraid of getting hurt. And it took me deliberately putting myself in a position where I had no choice but to overcome that fear. And it was a match, so it was a I don't want to say it was a prearranged fight because that makes it sound like it was choreographed. It wasn't. And I didn't throw the match by any stretch of the imagination, but I had been fighting in Armored Combat on and off for a couple of years, and this with the SCA, and then the guys from the Armored Combat League showed up in my town for a to kind of be the centerpiece entertainment for a racing event where people were running through the mud that they called Medieval Rush in Bismarck, North Dakota. And the event itself is pretty cool. I've never participated in it, but I've helped out at the event before. So, I am not sponsored by Medieval Rush. But so the Armored Combat League guys are there, and if you've never seen the Armored Combat League, oh my god, I'll link them in the description. These guys are hardcore. They dress in full steel armor. They're carrying the real deal weapons. Like, their weapons aren't sharp, but honestly, the real weapons weren't sharp either. These guys are going all out. The only rule is you can't hit someone when they're on the ground. You know, if they're not on both feet, you can't hit them. Other than that, you can throw people, you can shield punch people, you can grapple, you can kick. All of these things are actually encouraged. A couple of the fighters that I met at this event, one of them was actually the champion of Night Fight, Bill Bam Bam Woodbury. If you don't watch Night Fight, you should. And actually, I need to watch Night Fight. I've been neglectful of my duties as someone who loves the Middle Ages, but unfortunately I'm not someone who watches a lot of television, and by the time I found out that the first season was over, it was out, the first season was over. But, and I faced another one of the USA Knights. His name is Patrick, and so we squared off in the Eric, which is what we call a ring. It was actually an octagon. Go figure. Of course they'd use an octagon for extreme fighting. And we were using wooden weapons because my armor was not up to quality for metal ones. But all the rules applied. Okay, fine. So we square off, and it's 2 minutes in the ring. And we go at it, and we are wailing on each other. Like, I mean, like, I hit him in the head with my shield. You can't do that in the SCA. That's illegal in the SCA because it's so dangerous. He grappled me at one point and headbutted me with a helmet. 2 helmeted heads. It is probably both the most terrifying and freeing experience that I had up until my scarfing test, which was no less intense, but it was for totally different reasons. No, it was the most terrifying and freeing event of my life from a fear perspective. The scarfing event was freeing from a different perspective, from a limits removing perspective. But, you know, I had spent 2 years on and off the heavy field, and of course I fenced in there too, and fencing is my passion, so I do that. I will almost always choose fencing over heavy list. But, and it's not because I don't like doing heavy, it's because fencing is my passion. When you have the option, you do your passion. And I respect those that do heavy as their passion. I love doing heavy, but fencing's my passion, so that's what I do on the most part. But after that, you know, I had always, because I actually suffered a concussion early on in my heavy career, facing off against a guy who was probably twice my weight or close to it, and he was carrying a greatsword, and he was good with it. Like, could rattle my head with less than 12 inches of swing with a two-handed weapon. And we're not just talking like, oh, I hold this little sword with two hands. No, we're talking a 6.5-foot sword. Wooden or not, it's gonna ring your bell. But after that experience, I did the first 2-minute cycle, and I got halfway through the second 2-minute. And after that, I was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was severely dehydrated because the armor I was wearing, that I have, is so thick and so heavy. And I wasn't used to it because it was still fairly early in my heavy career. That it was 92 degrees outside, Bismarck, North Dakota, in the middle of summer. Of course, I'm going to be fighting in August, right? It was 120 inside of my armor. And so I was starting to suffer from heat exhaustion. Did not know it. But I ended up having to throw the towel in the second round. But in the first round, 2 solid minutes. And after that, heavy list no longer terrified me. It was exposure therapy. That, in and of itself, changed the entire way I thought about things, the entire way that I handled it. And if it weren't for that experience, I don't think I would be able to handle a lot of the other fears that I run into in life today. But it doesn't mean I'm immune to them. You know, we all get stage fright, performance anxiety. You know, I had a tournament back in January. That's where I got my black scarf, was after the tournament. That was the other defining fighting experience I've had, and of the two, that's the more important one. But it was not a fear situation, it was a breaking through my limits, because holy shit, we're doing this for 10 minutes non-stop. And I almost gave up on that one. 7.5 minutes, I almost gave up, and the proctor, would not let me, and thank God for that. But through the tournament, it was the first tournament I've had since I moved out to the Eastern region. We call it the East Kingdom. And I was so stuck in my head that I couldn't function. Because I'm fighting a whole bunch of people I've never fought before. I don't know these people. Out in the Midwest, I know like practically all the fighters. I mean, the fencing community on its own is a fairly tight community. But I had also been doing it there for like 5 years, so I knew everyone. And so coming into this new community, I didn't know everyone. And so that was that you know, how am I going to square up against these people that I've never fought before? Especially since, frankly, in an effort to reduce the anxiety of, not just the anxiety, but the stress of having to move, I talked a lot of shit. I generally don't talk a lot of shit, but occasionally, if sometimes it's a way to cope with having to do something you're not really keen on. So, and it was the situation itself I wasn't terribly thrilled with, but I mean, it is what it is. So, you know, I was talking shit, you know, and to kind of explain that, going from knowing everyone around you, knowing exactly where you're at, and then going into a situation where you don't know where in the pecking order you are. The move itself didn't bother me. It was, okay, now I'm in a group and I don't know where I lie. And for a fighter, that can be very unnerving, at least in my experience. It's exciting too, because it means you get to fight all these new people, and that's awesome, and you get to figure it out. But at the same time, when it's your first tournament, it's very stressful, at least in my experience. And I know there are people out there that don't give a shit, and that's fine too. A lot of them are really, really good, probably better than me. And I'm not bad, I'm just not top tier. But that fear, that stress, that performance anxiety existed, and this guy is getting like in my face apparently. And so, because of that change, I locked up for the first half of the tournament. I had a hard time moving, I wasn't loose, I wasn't relaxed. and I lost a lot. And then as the tournament started to wear on, because it was an endurance tournament for 3 hours, like no joke, 3-hour tournament. Probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours in, I realized I'm stuck in my head. That's my whole problem. That's why I'm sucking today. It's not because I'm not good, it's because I'm stuck in my head. And so I separated myself for a minute. I grabbed a drink of water, because you can forget to do that when you're doing an endurance tournament. You just get back in line and you go, 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 go. And I took about 5 minutes and I jumped up and down a few times and loosened myself up. And I reminded myself, it doesn't matter if I win. What matters is if I try hard. And I knew I had my test after this too, and I think that was part of it as well, was knowing that I had this big test to get my black scarf. And so I went back in and I did markedly better. I still didn't come close to winning the tournament. It's what they call a bear pit style, which is you cycle into one of the rings, you fight until one of you wins. If you win, you stay. If you lose, you go out. And you can win up to 3 times before you cycle. Person with the most wins overall wins the tournament. Okay, fine. It's 6 operational rings. You get in line, you cycle a bunch of times. And of course, the ring size was about half the size I'm comfortable with fighting. I like to actually be able to move. One of the deliberate parts of this tournament is the fact that there's no space. Like, there's very little footwork. Even though footwork's one of the most important parts of fencing, in order to... I don't know if it was by design to focus on blade work, or if it just happened to turn out that way. They eliminated the ability to retreat or to move from side to side very well. So, I mean, the Erics were like 10 by 10. They were tiny. Tiny. And I'm given to understand they expanded them this past time. So, I loosened up, I started to have more fun, I laughed when I died, and as soon as I started laughing when I died, and I know this is going to sound really weird, so, you know, we have a saying, we want to kill our friends, we don't want to hurt them, because when we're done killing them, we want to have drinks with them afterward. But one of the things that I often do, especially with fencers I'm not sure what their skill level is, or more importantly, with a fencer who I know is below my skill level, I'll laugh when they kill me. Because it's good that I lost to them. I learned something, they did well. You always learn more when you lose. But by reflecting upon it and overcoming that fear, that's the point of this whole story thing. By overcoming that fear, I was able to do better. And I did better because I relaxed. And then anxiety went away, that fear went away. Or at least it was able to be... I'm not sure if the word suppressed is the best word, but it was no longer important. Because I was having fun. It's like skydiving. There are people who love to skydive. They love the rush, right? And as someone who's also a bit of an adrenaline junkie, I totally get it. I'm not entirely sure I'll jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but at least I understand where they're coming from, right? So, the first time they're terrified, and then the second time it's a little better. And then the third, the fourth, the fifth, and then suddenly they're solo, and they're terrified again. But the more that they do it, the freer they are. They build it into the routine. More importantly, they learn how to relax and enjoy the experience. Interestingly, something that I watched on YouTube probably 2-3 weeks ago now. It was one of Dan Locke's videos, and no, I have no fucking clue which one it was, so I'm not even gonna go try to look for it. We all become very comfortable in our lifestyles, and that could be a limitation too. We're used to the type of style that we live in. So of course, for a lot of us, I think that's why some of us don't necessarily go for that promotion. We don't go for that opportunity at work, or maybe there's an opportunity at another job, but we don't want to do it because there's a fear. He calls it a fear of success, but I don't think it's a fear of success necessarily. It's a fear of change. At its root, yes, success is the result. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I think at its core, it's a fear of change. Success can create change. You know, so like when you, if you're like me and you're, you know, working or middle class, and you walk into the house of someone who's very wealthy, you often feel uncomfortable. Like I walked into, well, frankly, I walked into my future in-laws' house, and they're not super wealthy by any stretch, but the way they keep their house, you would think that, because they're very careful, and immaculate. My mother-in-law to be keeps an immaculate house, like seriously. And I walked into the house and I'm like, holy shit, I'm marrying up. And it was that perception, accurate or not, that I was in a position beyond my ken. So it is possible, and this can happen too if you're in a job where you have to deal with, you know, wealthy clients or customers. Good examples would be a window and door store, because those people, you know, they like to build their houses, so oftentimes you end up talking to wealthy clients. And for people like in a windows and doors store, you can sell $110,000 worth of product in a single transaction, which totally blew my mind. But after talking to a few people that do windows and doors, they're like, yeah, you know, people are building their houses. The windows and doors themselves can be a huge amount of money, depending on the size of the home and the type of the window and the type of the door. And you know, it includes installation. And I'm like, holy shit. And back in a previous job, oh shit, this is damaged. Unequip, attach. And like in a lot of jobs, you meet people from all walks of life. And I had a good mentor at a previous job I had, and she worked with a lot of these clients that were way above my pay grade, so to speak. And I said, how do you get over that intimidation factor? You know, that people like this, you know, they live a totally different lifestyle that I don't even understand, right? And she said, well, just remember, in the morning they put their pants on the same way you do. I am dead serious. And those words, it took me a while to process that. It did. But those words changed my perception a little bit. You don't need to be afraid of a lifestyle you don't know. Not even when you don't understand, because we all have different lifestyles due to wealth or lack thereof, or belief system, values. You know, the majority of lifestyles, they're not necessarily created equal. I'm not sure, but it doesn't mean they're not valid. And so when experiencing something new, when brought into, and when given insight into another person's lifestyle, I would suggest having an open mind. And I know this is a really weird segue. I'm late in this video at this point. I kind of like tangented in different directions as I'm trying to process some things that, because that's what this vlog is all about, right? You know, I do the Entropia Universe videos to entertain and talk about the game, and sometimes I talk about different subjects, but they usually relate back to EU. And I do the We Happy Few. Those are straight Let's Plays. I did Crash Bandicoot. I did part of Prey. I will finish Prey, I promise. But with my schedule right now, I'm having to focus on one game, and We Happy Few was the first one I started, and I have the most time in. Holy shit! I'm going on like, I'm on like. This weekend I'll be recording the 51st and 52nd episodes. And I don't even know where in the game I am for time. Right? So, I mean, I think it doesn't matter. I'm not going to tangent again. Tangent again. But I will finish Prey, I promise. That was the point of that whole spiel. I will do Crash 2, I will do Crash 3. I want to do a Portal playthrough at some point. I've done Portal, I've done Portal 2, but I want to do a playthrough. I really do. So that's gonna happen at some point. I've got some audio issues with Portal 1. I did like a whole video series of Portal 1 and couldn't hear shit. I was pissed because I did the whole thing in one day, like chunked out an entire afternoon. I did it. It was a great run. I loved the commentary I did, and the audio was totally fucked. So at some point that will happen once I unfuck the audio. Okay, so at this point I think that it's time. I'm gonna kill this curb. I'm gonna go back to the Jura Plateau mobile base up there, and we're gonna do the outro. You know, we went through a lot. We really did. So I really appreciate if you've come this far. Thank you for putting up with my rants. You know, I know the vlog is kind of my space to kind of vent ideas and shit, and I have my blog, of course, on www.mcbainmanor.com. Visit the website. I'll say it again, www.mcbainmanor.com. Link is in the description. Also, please take a look at my lady's Etsy shop. Link to that will also be in the description. It's Critical Links. She does fandom-inspired chainmail jewelry and accessories, men's and women's. 99.9% of her stuff is unisex. So please check that out. If it weren't for all of her support, and I don't necessarily mean monetary support, but if it weren't for all of her support, there's no way in hell I'd be able to do this. And so please just give a look. You know, and if you like something, think about buying it. She does custom work too. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe down below, please. It really helps me out. I really appreciate all of the support I've been getting. There's been great growth on the channel in the last month. 17 new subscribers. I went from 49 subscribers to 66 in 28 days. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much in the last 28 days. Hey, I'll see you next time. I might be traveling to Monria here pretty quick. I haven't decided whether I'm going there yet or not. I know they have their St. Patrick's Day thing this weekend. I'll figure it out when I get there. So, thank you again. I'm going to stop rambling. Have a great night.